Since the introduction of Resident Evil 4 Remake, there hasn't been an opportunity in the video to fully address the game, its differences with the original version and its impact on franchises, and now that it's been several months since it was introduced, various information has been leaked that allows us to draw a fuller picture of this work and see if it can meet the high expectations that it has, or not. So let's start with an issue and a question that I think is important to many of us fans. Resident Evil 4 was a fantastic game at the time of its launch, and according to the requirements of its time, the gameplay changed the works of the third-person shooter forever and also brought the horror genre into the modern world. In the meantime, the story of the 4th edition was something that appealed to many in that period, and its characters, including Luis Serra, forever fit into the hearts of fans, and personally, I enjoyed its storytelling greatly. But we should note that this issue goes back 17 years, and these positive qualities were also related to the medium and structure of the gaming industry at the time. On the other hand, in my opinion, Resident Evil 4 story had problems that can be improved in the remake version so that it can align with today's standards of the gaming industry. One of the most important of them was the addressing and so-called build-up irrationality of many characters or even enemies. For example, Jack Krauser's character was not founded logically at all, especially when the game was trying to familiarize the player with the character for the first time, and even though it played an important role in the story, it didn't have enough time to nurture the character, and it wasn't even present until the end of the game. Another example is Dr. Slavador. This character is officially one of the most iconic enemies in the history of this franchise, and even on the cover of some versions of Resident Evil 4, including the GameCube version, but we did not have much information about this character during the game. Therefore, I believe that the remake version should expand and improve the story of Resident Evil 4, and this is a topic that Shinji Mikami has emphasized in the past. But this has alarmed many fans because they feel that these changes may be at the detriment of the game, and I fully understand these concerns, but according to the leaks that have happened, it seems that this remake is taking steps to improve the story, and some of it really excites me. Let's put some of it under a magnifying glass. In the previous section, I mentioned Krauser's character about the poor payout of the original version, and as it turns out, we're going to see more of Krauser on screen in the remake. Before this information was leaked, rumors were going on in cyberspace that the character would be removed from the remake version, which had alarmed and upset many fans, and made me extremely concerned because we are all aware of Capcom's record of removing content from Resident Evil remakes. But fortunately, it seems that these rumors were not true. According to a recent leak, it has been revealed that Jack Krauser's character has been somewhat restored, and his appearance coverage has changed in general as well. In the remake version, he will wear a completely black switch with a tectonic cover like a bulletproof vest, and he is no longer supposed to be the person who kidnaps Ashley. In addition to these issues, the fighting section of Leon and Krauser's knife is still in game, but the scenario may have changed a bit, as QTE is no longer as popular and widely used as it used to be. I think these leaks are wonderful. Personally, when I experienced the 4th version, I didn't care so much about Krauser because it gave the player no reason to do so, and superficially addressing his relationship with Leon would only raise more questions in the player's mind. He was another enemy that we had to get out of the way, and the game didn't really pay him anymore. When I experienced Resident Evil The Dark Side Chronicles and saw the character's relationship with Leon as well as his evolution in that version, I was able to communicate more with him and understand his logic in the 4th version. However, I believe that Krauser had much greater potential in the 4th version, and this work could benefit him more. Now that there is a possibility that he will be more likely to appear in the remake version, I am very keen to see how the creators will approach this character and his story. If you remember that during the original story of the 4th edition, you were mostly in the role of Leon and sometimes also in the role of Ashley, and alongside it, you would be in the role of Ada Wong during the extra content of Separate Ways. Now, according to recent leaked information, it seems that Separate Ways is combined with the main campaign, and you will also play Ada throughout the story, but how to implement this issue can be different. We may see the mode of a few scenarios of the 2nd version in this version, which I personally feel is much better if it is implemented into multi-scenario mode, much better to constantly switch between characters and their storylines throughout the story. In addition to Ada, Luis's role has also become much more prominent. Some rumors point to the existence of a perfect scenario in the role of this character, which, like Jack Krauser, expands the overall story of Luis and his role in the story. And we'll even see flashback sequences and his relationship with his grandfather, which I think is great, because in the original version of this character, he didn't find that much time to shine, and even though he fits into our fans with his voice and charming personality, he deserved to be paid more. According to information published in the story of this character, Luis is supposed to be a character in most parts of the game and help Leon and Ashley, but apparently unlike his death in the original version, in the remake version is going to leap and become one of the boss fight of the game. Apparently, Luis is trying to help Leon and Ashley until the last minute, like the original version, but eventually the Las Plagas parasite grows in his body, causing him to mutate. If you're honest, I don't know how I feel about it. On the one hand, I believe that Luis's character's death in the original version could have been much better implemented, and perhaps this would have led to his evolution throughout the story in an emotional and meaningful ending for him, and on the other hand, I'm a little worried about how the implementation and logic behind it should be implemented, and for now, one has to wait and see how the creators make sense of this in the story of this title. Apparently, some characters and enemies are supposed to have a different performance and presence than the original version in the remake of this work. One of the characters that is going to change hands and be more present during the game is Dr. Salvador. At the beginning of the video, we talked a little bit about this character, and indeed his possible changes in this work are extremely appealing, and I think they can make him a more daunting enemy than ever before. According to published information, Dr. Salvador is set to get a more fictional background, as well as different mutation phases. He is supposed to follow you in the game environment, and each time he dies, he leaps, almost something like Birkin in the second version, and his height grows taller. Apparently the final stage of his leap is somewhat similar to Mega Dr. Salvador in the Mercenaries. In his final form, he also puts the boss fight ahead of the player and is apparently going to use several chainsaws. I can't imagine this structure coming off a bad thing. Dr. Salvador was one of the most daunting parts of the fourth version for me, and I personally love his structure and style. All of these changes, according to what we have seen so far from this game, are very logical and in accordance with the horror-driven atmosphere of Remake and can give much greater depth to the character and structure of this fascinating enemy's struggles. In addition to Dr. Salvador, other enemies including Regenerator and Iron Maiden have undergone changes and are set to be scarier than the original version. In the remake version, we're going to see 4 or even 5 different examples of them with different appearances and sizes, and the first Iron Maiden game is supposed to have body fragments of one of the scientists working on Las Plagas on his body, indicating that the scientist was killed by the skewers inside the creature's body. It is also said that the U3 has changed in general and is present in this version with a different look, and in addition, it is used differently and has a completely different function. According to this information, the player's confrontation with U3 is supposed to be something like the Beneviento house section in the 8th version, so that you have to escape U3 in a very dark environment and do a puzzle at the same time so that you can move on to the next environment and do the U3 boss. Mr. X was very suitable in the remake of the second version of a stalker and made the gaming experience much more daunting, but on the contrary I believe that Nemesis was very poorly used in the reconstruction of the third version and was not scary in any way like the original version. One of the reasons was the elimination of many parts of the game and the lack of enough space for Nemesis, and it was well felt to implement it hastily in this title. Now we're going to see several Stalker in the 4th edition remake that follow the player in different environments. This can be a very positive and somewhat negative issue as well. In my opinion, there is only a narrow line between the repetition of the performance of these Stalkers and their implementation and presence in size and balance. I think Capcom should be very careful in how it draws a sense of fear and apprehension in the player. And avoid frequent use of stalkers because it makes it monotonous and non-scary and merely becomes a headache for the player. Among these stalkers, there is a very interesting character that we will look at every single one of them. As you probably know, Chief Mendez is supposed to be one of the enemies that will follow you in part of the game, and we saw his appearance during the first trailer Resident Evil 4 Remake. According to published information, the character is present in various parts of the game, as well as his house has expanded and is one of the main parts you will encounter. It has also been noted that Mendez in this version takes granadas and pushes them towards you. In addition to Mendez, we are set to see Verdugos as chasing enemies as well. Apparently in this version Salazar only enjoys a Verdugo and sends him looking for Leon. This Verdugo cannot be killed because in the end it should be combined with him for the boss fight Salazar. This is the same interesting character I talked about. You're probably all familiar with Hookman's version and you've seen the gameplay. From the very beginning of the whispers around Resident Evil 4 Remake, many pointed out that Hookman is going to be in this version in some way, and as it seems, the probability of this presence is very high. Leak mentions that in the black hole section of Salazar Castle, there is a new pursuit enemy that points from a hook as a weapon. The part is supposed to be extremely dark, and so Leon relies entirely on the use of his flashlight, and when he turns the light on the character, he starts crying and stops for a while, allowing the player to escape his hand. This description bears a lot of resemblance to Hookman's elementary concept, and it's very pleasing that Capcom has gone for this exclusionary concept. The only question is whether this character is going to maintain the same spirit structure as itself, or are we facing a different design? If you ask me, I think we're facing a whole new design because the structure of the soul-like characters and in general its supernatural elements are not so consistent with this reconstruction, and I think Capcom has created a different background for this character. Among the leak to this game, we see some omissions in enemies and environments, which we will mention and analyze below. According to the leaked, the island section appears to have been largely shrinking, and the enemies of the miniguns have been eliminated altogether. If you're honest, I'm personally happy with this, because I think the island section of the original version was somewhat disrupting the game process and was too action-driven. It was as if that part of the game had been directed by Michael Bay. So I feel this could benefit this effect in the stability of its sphere. If you don't remember, these two sisters were the same two female Warsaw enemies that you encountered as part of the game. As it turns out, the two have been removed along with their related sections in general, and I don't really understand why they're behind it. Perhaps Capcom intended to have only one chainsaw enemy, Dr. Salvador, in the game, making him look special, and they put all their focus on him. Perhaps there was no particular reason behind this, and only the creators had no reason to return the two characters. Who knows? These insects, too, did not make it to the game, even though they were interesting and challenging enemies, and have generally been removed from the remake version. The reason for the removal of these insects could be Hookman in the prison and black hole section of the castle, and the presence of these insects in this section has interfered with its structure. This case has not been completely eliminated, but there is only one El Gigante during the experience of the title, which goes back to the village section and will probably be the same as El Gigante's first boss fight. Other than that, all other presences of this giant enemy, including the 2 ways after the defense section of the hut in the 2nd chapter, as well as its 4th chapter boss, along with their related environment, have been completely eliminated from the game. Finally, we need to see what replaced these enemies and their related parts in the final version and judge them accordingly. Ashley in the remake version will not be an extra weight on the shoulders of the player, unlike the original version, and will play a much wider role. Related to this character, leak refers to the start of the game with Ashley. As it seems, in the remake version, we will first start playing Ashley, and after the end of this section, we will be in the role of Leon. This issue seems to me to be very much in favor of storytelling because it makes the campaign have a prologue section. And a background of Ashley's character and how she was kidnapped is also provided to the player. In addition, Ashley's gameplay section in the castle has also been prolonged, and now he has the ability to use a knife, and even some leaks point to the part of the game where Ashley holds a Leon gun and has a different shooting mode than Leon because his marking is not accurate and he is constantly shaking because of the stress of his hand. The AI of this character has also received many improvements, and now she has the ability to help Leon during campaigns as well as throw stones at enemies that remind me of Natalia in Resident Evil Revelations 2. In general, these Ashley changes were one of the biggest needs of the remake version compared to the original and really needed improvement. I feel these changes not only make Ashley's character much more lovely and bold, but also make the overall gaming experience more dynamic and greatly improved. All the things we've looked at during the video are just a rumor, but these rumors can give us a snapshot of the developments and improvements of this remake. Many of these things, like omissions, may seem very bad in appearance, but perhaps when experiencing the game, we find a logical reason not to return these things. On the contrary, some of these things may seem very attractive on paper, but Capcom is poor in implementing them. All we can do right now is first of all accept that this work is a remake and it's not going to be a completely similar experience to the original version and open our arms to new ideas and enjoy the hype of the game until the day comes. I would like to know your comments about the video and the information we reviewed from this game. So I'd be happy to talk and exchange ideas in the comments section.